Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of the Graduate Research Showcase here for Grad Suite. My name is Jenna Salman, and I'm the Professional Development Chair for Grad Suite, and I'm happy to share that we have a very esteemed speaker here with us today. Dr. Lindvall is a very impressive career, including 51 years in higher education, and he is the author of the book Applying for Graduate Admission in U.S. Engineering Schools. His most recent role was as the Assistant Dean of Graduate Admissions at Northwestern University, where he oversaw graduate admissions. And in his time there, he also served on the National Science Foundation's Research for Experience for Undergraduates panels, as well as the GEM Fellowship Board of Directors. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lindvall for this very helpful presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenna, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I really have three parts in what I want to do over the next hour. The first part is I have a PowerPoint presentation. You see the first slide. The second part, I try to allow about half our time for Q&A. And the easiest way for Q&A is as I'm presenting and you have questions, just start typing them in the chat box. Whether your question is unique or somewhat different than another one, when we finish and I get into the chat, I will simply try to consolidate answers, expand answers, whatever. And then the third thing I'm going to do is I connect with a lot of students through LinkedIn. Today, I surpassed a milestone. I now have 14,000 connections in LinkedIn. I have over 20 posts in LinkedIn. I communicate through LinkedIn. And then when somebody wants to send me a document, it's many times easier for you to shift to my email. So in the chat, you'll already see my LinkedIn connection. You will also see my email address, and then we'll have that up on the screen at the end. So Jenna, again, thanks for the kind introduction. I am ready to go to the next slide, please. It doesn't matter whether you're a senior ready to apply next year or a freshman, a master's student, or anybody in between all this. I think there are some critical questions that you really need to ask yourself, and I'll do the best in the presentation to try to answer some of these, and then in the Q&A we can dig a little bit deeper. I think one of the critical questions that you need to ask is, am I preparing to get a job or am I preparing for my career? Because a job is immediate and a career is stepping back, really looking at the bigger picture. And I encourage you to step back, look at the bigger picture as much as you can. For what you want to do, you need to ask the question, do I need a graduate degree? Another question is, will I stay in school when I finish my bachelor's or even a master's? Or will I go to work for a while and then come back? I will warn you from 20 years of experience, once you start working, it is very hard to quit a job and go back to school. So that's my warning. Don't fool yourself and think, oh, it'll be easy to do. It's not. Another question is, should I pursue a master's or a PhD? I'll give you some interesting data later. Should I complete a master's and then decide whether I want to do a PhD? We'll talk about that. How will I pay for graduate school? Most of you, I'm sure, if you announce to your family that you want to go to graduate school, they may just say, oh, no, no, no. Can't do that. We don't have the money. We planned on 4 years for you. We can't pay for a graduate degree. We'll talk about that. How early do you begin preparing for graduate school? Well, we're doing this presentation tonight. So I would say if you haven't been preparing already, whether you're a freshman or a sophomore, whatever, there are certainly ways that you can prepare from this point forward. Another question we'll talk about is, what do I need to know about graduate admissions? I read things every day. Last year was the most horrific year I've been in 20 years, and lots of things change. You probably read about it. I had someone today post in LinkedIn and said, "Why would anyone ever apply for graduate school as an international student? They'll never get a visa approved." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure that's the case." So, lots of things going on out there. We'll talk about it. Jenna, please, the next slide. Why a graduate degree? If you want to do more challenging work, if you want to have more fulfilling work, if you want to start at a higher level and move up more quickly, there is data out there to show that salaries are higher with graduate degrees, in some cases quite significant. If you ever do lab work at the university, if you're ever out there working in industry, you work at a national lab, look around in whatever setting you're in and say, I really like what they're doing. And then ask that person, I really like what you do. What kind of background did you have to be able to do this work? And in some cases, you're going to find that a graduate degree is almost necessary or sometimes even required. I made this point earlier, it's worth repeating. Very few bachelor degree graduates who go into the workforce ever go back to school. I saw 20 years of it, and I can promise you that it doesn't happen nearly as often as what people say they're going to do. Jenna, I'm ready for the next one. Here are some changes in the graduate admission and funding landscape. If you read the newspapers, if you read media, you realize that there have been major changes with NSF and NIH funding. That happened mid-year last year, and that means that some universities simply said, we can't admit as many students as what we've been doing. We lost our funding. For the most part, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI programs have been eliminated. We can talk about that later. Way back when we had COVID, there was a major change when ETS, Educational Testing Service, had to shut down all their test centers. And universities realized they couldn't require the GRE when students couldn't take it. So what happened after we came out of COVID, universities said, we didn't have to have the scores. We can make a lot of decisions. So most universities are no longer requiring it. Some universities say we don't even use it, but most schools will say it's optional. The problem with optional is they're never going to tell you whether 20% or 80% of the students submitted scores. So I often tell students, look at websites if no one's requiring it and you're a really strong student, I wouldn't bother to worry about the GRE, to pay for the GRE, to prepare for it. Based on the June 2023 Supreme Court decision, it was declared that race could not be used in admissions. So here's what happened. I was working at Northwestern. I knew what we needed to do, and that's what the graduate school did. Schools are still going to collect race information. They're going to ask whether you're Black, Hispanic, mixed, Caucasian, whatever. But then the application information is collected, and the application then is a decentralized process, and it goes out to the program. When it goes out to the program, the race classification is removed. If you are an underrepresented minorities, we can talk about this, but there are certainly ways on your resume and different things where you can help someone understand that you are an underrepresented minority student, and some schools still feel very strongly about having a diverse population. Other schools may not. This past year, especially, you probably heard horror stories. The job market was tighter than what we've seen in a long time, and we can't predict what's going to happen in the year ahead. The last point I have, PhD offers of admission were dropped. There were wild stories that they were going to be rescinded. I'm not really aware of cases where a student was offered admission and then the admission was rescinded. I'm sure there are isolated cases, but I think for the most part, schools did not admit as many students. Now, if their funding situation is improved, this may be a much better year because if somebody needs PhD students, they didn't admit enough last year and they've resolved funding issues, then they may be admitting more students this year to make up for the down year. Okay, I am ready for the next slide. And again, if you have any questions, type them into the chat because I'll be happy to look at all your questions when we finish. Here are some interesting facts. Some of these will surprise you. Some of you may know this. In general, a PhD program should be fully funded. What do I mean by that? Well, normally it means on one hand, the university says, we're going to pay your tuition. So whether you're looking at a public or private university, that number doesn't matter because it goes to zero. PhD students should be given a stipend. Those stipends will range from maybe $35,000 on the low end to, I know some schools are hovering around 50,000 or so, but you got to keep in mind a third part, some schools provide your health insurance. At Northwestern, for example, and I'm not trying to push Northwestern, we had an endowment that paid for the health insurance. Health insurance, when I left Northwestern, was about $6,000 a year. So if you have to have health insurance, it's important to find out whether a school is going to pay for it. Because if your stipend's $36,000, but you have to pay $6,000 for your health insurance, then you really have $30,000 of disposable income to be able to pay for housing, your food, and other costs. In the United States, you can go to a post that I have, the American Society for Engineering Education, ASEE, has enrollment data for bachelor's, master's, PhD students by major at every university in the country. And when you look around, you're going to see that about 70% of the master's and the PhD students in U.S. engineering schools are not from the United States. I find that troublesome, so I spend a lot of time trying to encourage U.S. students to go to graduate school. We need more of you. Keep in mind that a master's degree generally is not required for PhD admission. And lastly, perhaps only 30% of the graduates go into tenure track faculty positions. At Northwestern, I found that about 70% of our students either worked in industry, they worked at national labs, or some of them even had startup companies with their background. Okay, Jenna, I'm ready to move. Here's a quick overview of graduate admissions. They're online applications. There are 2 or 3 major vendors. Some schools have their own version. So when you go in and you start working, you'll see some aspects of applications that are just like the last one you did. They usually open in August or September. PhD deadlines are usually sometime in December. Master's degree deadlines can go from probably December, January, all the way out until maybe the middle of the summer. You typically set up 3 letters of recommendation. I always tell students, it's not the title of the person, it's people who really know you the best. Now you have to go to the university websites because sometimes they'll say 2 of these people are going to have to be in academia, one person could be out in industry. But follow the restrictions. And then what you do is you type in the name of the person, their title, who they work for, their email address, and then that invitation goes to that person. You never handle the recommendation. The recommender submits it. You'll typically have a page where you can see if they're being submitted. It's your responsibility to make sure that the 3 recommendations are submitted. You're going to upload a resume or a CV. Most schools have you upload your unofficial transcript. Now keep in mind when you apply, if it's in the fall, you're not going to have your fall grades. Once you submit your application, you're done. You no longer have access. But if you feel worried about maybe my academic background's marginal and you get a 4.0, chances are you should write to the department, maybe a staff member, and say, I just got my fall grades. Is there any way that you can submit them for me? The statement of purpose or personal statement or essays, follow the instructions for each school. I will share more about that. The process is typically decentralized. You don't want to go to the graduate school and try to figure out what's going on in the chemical engineering department. Good university websites should have a section on admissions for every department. That's where you've got to get the information. Most PhD admissions are going to be centered on fall only. Every once in a while, someone may admit a student in an off quarter, and master's admissions sometimes is fall only, or students may be admitted at different times. Keep in mind that if you're graduating in December, you can't assume that everybody is going to take you a month after you graduate. So check that out on websites and write and find out whether you can apply for something other than a fall quarter. For PhD admissions, the whole process ends on April 15th. We all belong to the Council of Graduate Schools, and it basically says April 15th is when you have to make your final decision, and a school cannot require you, if they belong to the Council of Graduate Schools, they can't force you to make a decision by March 1st. You have until April 15th. Most schools for PhD admissions will invite you to campus. They'll pay for your trip. You visit, you talk to students, you see facilities, you meet with faculty, and then you have until April 15th to decide where you want to go to school for your PhD. Master's admissions, I call it the Wild West because there is no common deadline and they're all over the place. People want decisions, they want deposits, and it's not uncommon for students to accept admission to multiple MS programs. Next slide, Jenna, please. Essay questions. I'm going to go to the bottom of this page and then come back up. My 5-minute rule says faculty are busy, they teach, they do research. Some of them don't like to review applications. So your application may only get a 5-minute review. One of the most important things beyond your academic record is going to be your statement of purpose. You'll see posts that I have in LinkedIn. I tell students, do not waste your time writing to faculty with silly questions. Are you taking any students? Do you have funding? Most faculty, don't respond. I say the response rate is typically no more than 20%. And some of them may say, I don't know whether I'm going to have my 3-year research grant renewed. So I don't know the answer to your question, but put your effort into going to websites, finding faculty that have research that matches what you want to do. So the 2 points of your essays, on one hand, you want to define the type of research you want to do, and then to help the process, name faculty at each university that are really good matches for what you want to do. That will greatly enhance your chances of that person really reviewing your application in more detail. Do not repeat what you have on your CV. I tell students that a CV or resume is really past. The statement of purpose is more of a future document. So don't repeat things. People start reading and say, I'm tired. I don't like reading these things. I think I just read that someplace. You don't want someone to lose interest because you've got something less than a succinct application. I thought of this today when I was preparing my comments. I went into an application one time before I retired. I'll try to use a kind word, but some confused student, I'm going to use another word, but I won't, submitted 96 pages for his application. Now, how many faculty are going to read 96 pages? So the simple thing there is more is not better. And if you want me to review any of your statements of purpose, you want me to review your resume, I do that on a daily basis. I'm more than happy to do that. Let's go to the next one, please. There are funding fellowships that are available, and I'm going to go over these. If you need help with any of these, I can always do that as follow-up to this. The National Science Foundation is the biggest plum in the tree. It is 3 years of funding. Recently, they funded 1,500 students this past cycle. They had dropped 1,000, they added on 500. It's been as high as 2,000. Years ago, it was only 1,000. If you are a senior or you're now in graduate school, you can apply for that. That takes the pressure off of some faculty member trying to figure out how to fund you when they want you. If you can say, I've got 3 years of funding, that really takes a lot of pressure off. NDSEG is very similar to the National Science Foundation. They have a website with all that has to be done. These two fellowships, as well as the next two, are open to only U.S. students. The GEM Fellowship at the master's level pays tuition. It provides 2 summer internships, and GEM passes $8,000 through to the university that's given to the student. I was the GEM rep at Northwestern for 20 years. I was on the board of directors for 12. I Zoom with students all the time about the GEM Fellowship. I am more than happy to help you one-on-one with that. SMART is a Department of Defense. That's a little bit trickier because if you get funded for 2 years, then you're going to have to work at a Department of Defense facility for 2 years, and then you're free to go where you want. So I've never dealt with very many students, but these two, GEM and SMART, are the ones that you want to look at if you're going to apply for a master's degree. On the other hand, whether you're international or you're US, most of the PhD funding comes from the university from a faculty member's research grant. If you're admitted to a PhD program, that admission letter should say, we're going to fund your tuition. You don't pay anything. Your stipend is going to be X amount. If they don't mention health insurance, you need to ask. And then it should tell you, we're going to fund you for a minimum of 5 years. If you ever get an admission letter, and I had some this year where I looked at it and said, it's not telling you everything, you need to go back and ask the school before you make an April 15th decision. Am I going to be funded for 5 years? Are you going to pay my health insurance? You're not explaining all this. Again, I can work with any of you one-on-one for any of these things that I have on this page. Go ahead, Jenna, please. I have been doing this for 20 years. I retired in November of 2023. And I feel so strongly about encouraging more U.S. students to go to graduate school. That's why I do what I do. I do not charge anything for my assistance. And too often we have international students who get a degree want to work in the United States. The company, the national lab, and others may say, sorry, we can't hire you. The last point on this slide, every day of my life, I'm reading information to keep up with what's going on. So I try to know what's going on with DEI at a particular university. I'm listening for what's going on with graduate admissions. I worked at a university where the federal government has held $790 million in research dollars. The president recently resigned. Whether that money is going to get released or not, that's going to have a lot to do with how many PhD students may be admitted at Northwestern in the coming cycle. Next slide, please. Here's what I suggested last year, and I'm suggesting it again this year. Some students can't decide which way to go, and you don't have to decide that. If you are a senior, it makes sense to apply for both jobs and graduate admissions. In the case of graduate admissions, many schools, if you write to them and say, I've got a wonderful job offer, I'd like to take the job offer, can you defer my admission for a year? That's up to an individual school. Some schools do it, some do not. Some do it for masters, some do it for PhDs, some do it for both. So all you can do is ask. If you're in a BS/MS program and you've only got a short time to finish the master's, you have a job offer with a company, it doesn't hurt to ask. I mean, they're not going to take the job offer away. You can say, I want to be really honest with you. I've got graduate admission to a master's program. It'll only take me a half a year, maybe a full year to finish. Is there any way that you would delay my start date until I finish my master's and then I can start the position? One of the fun posts that I did not long ago is I found a picture of a basket with all the eggs spilled out. And I've had all sorts of people read that. But that post is explaining even more than what I have on this page. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you don't apply for jobs and you don't get graduate admissions, you're behind everybody else that's already got a job. The opposite can happen too. And I've had students over the years that didn't get a job. And by the time they contacted me, I said, you missed every graduate application deadline we have. Good luck. Mom and dad are going to put you in the basement for a year. I'm trying to be funny, but I'm sure that some families have had some very, very difficult decisions to make when a student didn't get what they wanted and they didn't plan for another option. I'm going to go to the last slide now, please. You'll see my Outlook email address. You can write to me at any time about anything. I prefer that all of you, if you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, that you go to LinkedIn, ask to connect with me, and I approve every connection. And I'm happy to continue to work with you through LinkedIn. And then, as I alluded to earlier, I Zoom with students all the time. I have Zoomed this past weekend with a student, and I have Zoom meetings almost every day of the week. So, you know, as we work together, if you say, gee, I'd really like to Zoom, I have my own Zoom account. I will set it up, send you the invitation, and be happy to spend a full hour with anyone as we work through applications, essays, resumes, the GEM fellowship, whatever.